Hey everyone, welcome back to Godot. In this video, we're going to be going over the introduction to 2D character movement using Godot 4.3. This is very beginner friendly, so if you're new to Godot, feel free to check out the whole video and let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so let's go ahead and click create on the top left to create our new project, and I'll just call this tutorial, and I'll just save it in my documents folder. You can select where you want to save it by hitting this browse button. And for the render, I'm going to select forward plus because it supports desktop, and I'm just going to be using this for a tutorial. Version control, you can select get. I'm going to select none, and I'll hit create and edit to actually launch our project. And now with this launch, there are a few assets that I'll need. So the first one I'm going to be using is the Halloween graphics by Final Boss Blues on itch.io. I'll go ahead and link this in the description below if you want to download this and follow along. I'll select this download. And once it's extracted, I'm going to use the Reaper character, and I'll just go ahead and select the Reaper 1 PNG. So he has a little scythe on it. It's going to be blurry because, of course, it is pixel art. And now back in my project, the first thing I'm actually going to do is increase my editor size so it's easier for you guys to see. You can follow along if the text is too small for you personally or you're using a giant monitor, or you can leave it as is. So I'm just going to head over to the editor tab, hit editor settings, and while editor is selected, I can display scale above. So I'll do something like 150% just so it's easier to see. And I have to actually restart. So I'm going to go ahead and save and restart. And now with this restarted, hopefully it's easier for you guys to be able to see and follow along. I'll just expand this so it's a bit easier. The text is much bigger, the windows are much bigger. And another thing that I want to go over is when you're in the editor settings and if you want to change the theme or the color, let's say you're not a fan of this gray or blue, they do come with different presets when you head over to editor settings and then click the theme tab. You can change this to something like how Godot 2 used to look, and it takes a second to load, so it's more gray, a bit more of a sleeker theme in my opinion. And there's also this solarized dark setting where it becomes a bit of an aqua blue as if you're underwater. And then you can also select custom, and I can just give it a bit of a darker color, which is just a personal preference. And yeah, that's pretty much how you just change your editor theme if you wanted to change your color. So now from here, all I'm going to do is right click on my res file or my res folder, which is the top level of my hierarchy. And I'm going to click create new and select folder. And now with this folder, we're going to be placing our assets in it. And I also want to create one for scenes and scripts. So I'll go ahead and name this assets, hit OK, and then right click, create a new folder. And then I'll call this one scripts, which is where our coding is going to go. And then I also want to create one more for scenes, just like that. While I select my assets folder, I'm going to right click this and click open in file manager. And now while this is open, I'm going to open up that Reaper folder that we extracted to get our character, and I'm just going to copy paste this image directly into this assets folder. And now we'll have this PNG here, and when I go back to my project, it's going to load that in real quick, and we'll be able to see this over here, like so. So I'm going to go ahead and create a 2D scene, and I'm just going to rename this to game. This is going to be our top level where our game stuff is going to be. So I'm going to drag in components such as our level, our player, and so on. So I'll hit Control S, and now in the scenes folder, I'm going to save this as game.tscn. So I'll hit save here, and now I'm just going to select scene, click new scene, and we're going to begin creating our player. So instead of selecting 2D scene, I'm actually going to create something called a character body 2D. And this is basically going to allow us to have 2D physics for our character. So I'll double click on this, and now at the top level, you'll see that it says character body 2D. And this will be our player. So I can go ahead and click Control S again to save, and I'll save this as player.tscn. So I'll hit save like so. And this is pretty much just going to tell us that this is actually our player. And if you want, you can change your character body 2D to player. And now from here, I actually need to add something that will actually allow us to animate our sprite. So I'm going to click on this plus sign or Control A, which is a shortcut. And I'm going to look for something called an animated sprite 2D. So this will allow us to select multiple frames of our sprite images and sequence them into an animation. So I'm going to double click to select that. And with animated sprite 2D selected, I'm going to drop down this animation, and next to sprite frames, I'm going to select new sprite frames. And now one more time, I need to click on sprite frames, and now the animation tab at the bottom will pop open. And just a side note, if you want to full screen your Godot editor, go ahead and hold shift and click F11, and this will hide that Windows bar at the very bottom. And now back to our animated sprite, I'll go ahead and select the sprite frame, and now you'll see that it pops up with a default animation. I'm actually going to double click to change the name of this to something like idle down. And the reason why I have an idle down is because this sprite image comes with 4 directions. So when I double click on my PNG, you'll see that my character can face down, left, right, and up. And what I want to do is have idle directions in each of these, and same with walk directions in all 4 directions. So now back on our animated sprite, when I select sprite frames, our idle down image will consist of our player facing down when it's just standing. So I'm going to go ahead and select this button that adds frames from our sprite, and this will allow us to look for our assets and select the Reaper Blade 1. And now when I scroll in, so I'm going to hold control and zoom in with my mouse wheel, you're going to see that these lines are not aligned in the way that we want. We pretty much want them to be evenly spread out in both ways. So for this specific asset, it's going to be a 3x4. And if you don't know what it is, you can keep playing with these lines to make sure that each square has each sprite evenly across horizontally and vertically. So this is simply 3x4, and I can go ahead and select my idle down, which is going to be the center one. So I'll go ahead and add this frame like so. And now you'll see that it adds it directly into the middle, and it's quite blurry. We don't want this. And the reason why it's blurry is because by default, Godot will try to enhance how our textures are, but in this case, because it is pixelated, we don't want to use that enhanced texture. So I'm going to go ahead and select project and go to project settings. And then down where it says rendering, under the rendering, I'm going to look for textures, and I'm going to change default texture filter from linear to nearest. And as soon as I do that, you'll see my character looks a lot more even and pixelated, exactly what we're looking for. So I'm just going to go ahead and hold down my mouse click and drag this up the Y axis, like so. And then I'll hit Control S to save again. And you'll notice that we only have an idle down. We also need to make one for each direction and then a walk one as well. And in order to create new animations, I'm going to click on this plus sign over here to add animation. And now I'm going to call this idle up, and then I'll create another one and double click and rename this to idle right, and another one for the idles, and this will be called idle left. So I'll go ahead and just go down and add these one by one, and you should pause the video and try to see if you can do it on your own. And now with idle left selected, I'm going to click on the sprite sheet to add frames from a sprite sheet, select the PNG, and just select the left looking one, like so. And then I'll go ahead and add this one frame. Some animations do come with multiple frames for idling, but this one, it's not the case. And now I'm going to select the idle right, PNG, and select my character facing right. And then this last but not least, with the idle up, I'm going to select the sprite sheet, click on the PNG, and select the image where my character is facing up. And that's perfect. And now let's go ahead and add some walk animation. So I'm going to click on the add animation, and I'll go ahead and add 4. And now pretty much the same thing, where I'm going to have a walk down, walk up, walk right, and a walk left. So with the walk up, I'll go ahead and select this button to add frames from the sprite sheet, select PNG, and now I can hold down my mouse click and pretty much go over wherever I want to select all the frames. So if I hold down my left click here and drag it across the right while holding it down, it'll add these 3 frames in order. And I can go ahead and do the same thing to just undo it. And it is important where you are starting your mouse click. So for example, if I just, go this way, it'll you select all of them. If I start from this way to this way, it could be backwards, but in this case, that's totally fine because there is only 3. And make sure you don't select the wrong one. So I'll go ahead and just select these 3 and click add 3 frames. And in order for us to see how it looks, I can go ahead and hit this play button like so. And now it looks like our character is actually walking upwards. And that's exactly what we're looking for our walk up. And if you wanted to change the FPS and make it faster, you can go ahead and do so by just inputting an animation speed number over here. So if I do 10, it'll go double the speed of our 5 FPS, and it'll kind of look like he's starting to run a bit faster. If I do something like 60, he is having some issues now. So let's go ahead and change this back to 5, like so, and let's go ahead and do these with our other animations and try these out. So for the walk right, I'm going to select the add frames from sprite sheet, select the PNG, and look for the right animation. and look for the 3 frames of him walking to the right and click add 3 frames and select play to just make sure it looks right. And this looks great to me. And now same thing with the walk left. Select these 3, add 3 frames, hit play, and finally the walk down. Select add these 3 and click play, and there we have it. So I'll go ahead and hit Control S to save. And now that we have all our animations, you're going to notice that next to our player, we have this triangle warning sign. And we can go ahead and left click to pop up the warning or hover over it. And it's pretty much just going to say that this node has no shape. It can't collide or interact with other objects. And this is because we need to add a collision shape 2D or a collision polygon 2D. So we need to define something to actually give it the physics. So while player is selected, I'm going to hold control and click A, or you can click this plus button to go ahead and add a collision shape 2D. And with the collision shape 2D selected, in the inspector tab on the right, I'm going to look under the shape and just create a new circle shape like so. And I want to kind of align this to where my character is. And if you want to align it perfectly along the X or Y axis, go ahead and hold the shift key while dragging it wherever you want to the axis. And it'll go to the axis closest to your mouse cursor. So I'll go ahead and just align it over here. Now you'll see the circle on the right. And if you just drag this downwards, you'll notice that the circle will go down as a whole and not get deformed. And that's kind of what we're looking for. So I'm just going to have this placed a bit on the bottom side of the player like so. And if you need to move it left or right depending on how your character looks, you can hit W on your keyboard or you can select this move mode like so. And you can go ahead and drag these arrows left or right to move along the X or Y axis. And if you need to shrink or make it smaller other than dragging this button, other than dragging this dot over here, you can go ahead and click S to enter scale mode. And scale mode would allow you to scale on the Y or X axis like so if you have a ununiformed character. And last but not least, if you needed to rotate something, for example, if you have a diamond shaped character and you need to rotate a square, you can go ahead and hit E and then you can rotate along this. And you'll see that my circle is now rotating with that dot. And now let's go back to the select mode by clicking Q. And this pretty much looks good to me. And now I'm going to go back to my game scene and drag my player in. So I'm going to open the scenes folder and just drag my player in like so and click F on my keyboard to go to exactly where my character is. And I'm just going to go ahead and align it with the X and Y axis here. And by default, when you hit play, so let's go ahead and click on this play tab over here, it's going to say no main scene has ever been defined. And you can also change it later in project settings. So while the game is selected, I'm going to click select current to actually just play this scene. And by default, you're not going to be able to see your character, and that's because we are actually looking at the bottom right quadrant of our game. So for example, you'll see up here, these 4 quadrants. By default, the game looks at the positive X and the positive Y. So as you can see, now that I moved it to the positive X and positive Y, we'll be able to see our Reaper character over here, and it looks very zoomed out because we don't have a camera attached to our player. And in Godot, when Y is positive, it's actually going down. Where in school or math class, they might have taught you that the top right is actually the positive X and the positive Y. But in Godot, positive X and Y is actually on the bottom right. And now with our game selected, I'm just going to drag my player back in the middle and let's go ahead and actually attach a camera to our player scene. So with player selected under game, I'm going to go ahead and hit Control A and look for a camera 2D. And now you'll see this purple square or this pink/purple square around our character. And this is pretty much just telling us where our camera is at the moment and how much we can see. So if I were to go ahead and hit play, it's a bit far from our character, but at least our character is right in the middle. And by going to the inspector tab on the right, I can select how zoomed in we want to be. So I'm going to select something like 5 by 5, and now when I hit play, you're going to see that our character is much more visible and easier to see. But currently our character doesn't do anything, and that's for a few reasons. We actually need to create a script that tells us which inputs to take and which direction the inputs allow us to go depending on what we click on. So for example, if we hit W, we want to go up, and A will go left, S will go down, and D will go right. or whatever controls you want if you're using a controller, mouse, keyboard, and so on. So I'm going to exit out of this. And now the first thing I want to do is actually define my inputs. And in order to define inputs in Godot, you head over to Project, click Project Settings, and now on the top, you will see next to General, there's something called an input map. And with input map, you can go ahead and click on this add new action. And we can name this whatever we want. So I'm going to go ahead and call this something like move down. And then on the right of it, I'll click on this add button. And now we have the move down, and now we actually need to assign a keybind. And in order to assign a keybind, we'll go ahead and click on this plus sign to add an event. And with the event, you can look for certain things such as joypad access, joypad buttons, mouse buttons, keyboard keys, and so on. And let's say you have a controller or your mouse and keyboard connected to your computer, then you can just simply click filter by events, like while you're clicked in here, and it'll just say listening for input. So for the move down, I'm going to use the S key. So when I hit S on my keyboard, it'll automatically find it over here. And you can also add additional options so that Alt S, for example, will move down instead of just regular S. And you can have Shift S, Control S, and so on. But I'll leave these blank for now, and I'll just have the S key move my character down by clicking OK. And now I want to go ahead and add a move up, like so. And then I'm also going to add a move right, and I'll add one called move left. And now next to each of these, I'm simply just going to select the move up, click on the plus sign, and for the listening for input, I'm going to hit W. And then for the move right, I'm going to add an event for the D key. And for the move left, I'm simply going to add the input event for the A key. So this looks good to me. And now with that said, we actually need to define it in a script on our player. So I'm going to go ahead and close this tab out and go to the player scene. And with the player scene selected, I'm going to go ahead and click player, and I'll click on this button here to actually attach a new or existing script to this node. And this node will actually be called player.gd. And the .gd stands for GD script, which is an interpreted language that is similar to Python, specifically for the Godot engine. So with the path, I'm actually going to go ahead and click on this folder icon, go up the path, and then go into the scripts folder and click open to save it here, like so. So now the path is in our scripts folder, and I'll go ahead and click create. And now you'll see that the first line of code is actually extending the character body 2D. And this just means that we're actually getting our features and functionalities that already comes with the character body 2D in the Godot engine. And that's because the player is a character body 2D. And if you're completely brand new to GDScript or programming, I highly recommend going over the Learn GDScript from Zero by GDQuest, which is free for everyone, and I'll link that in the description below. You can go through multiple lessons, and it teaches you from the very start of what it's like to code to your first error, all the way up to strings and vectors and just much more. I personally like to go through these a lot, and I always reset the progress and then just skip to the end to just do the practices and just keep refreshing my mind. So now back to our player scene. Under my extends character body 2D, I'm going to create a variable called max speed and set this to 100. So this line creates a variable called max speed. A variable is like a container where we store information. In this case, we're storing the number 100, which will be the maximum speed for our character. And now let me go back to our 2D scene by clicking 2D up here and go to the animated sprite. And let me just show you a couple of things. So basically, whenever a character stops walking, I want it to go to the idle down mode if the last button I clicked was the down key. Same thing for the left. If I'm walking left and my character stops, I want it to just stay while facing left. In order to create this functionality in our script, I'm going to go ahead and click script over here. I need to create a variable for a vector. So I'm going to set a var last direction, which is going to be a vector2, and I'm going to set it to 1, 0. And a vector2 is a type of variable that stores two numbers, which is an x or y. And this is pretty popular for 2D positions. So setting it to 1, 0 just tells us that the character will initially start facing in the right direction. So we have 1 for the x. And now let's go ahead and create a function that uses the physics process. So I'm going to create func physics process, and I'm going to pass in the delta variable. So this line defines a function called physics process. Functions are blocks of code that run when called. Physics process is a special function in Godot that runs every frame, specifically for anything related to physics, like movement. And delta represents the time that has passed since the last frame. This will ensure us that the movement is smooth. And inside our physics process, you'll notice that when I click enter, it's going to automatically indent for us. And indenting is very important for GDScript. If you don't indent properly, you will get errors. So in our function, we're going to create a variable for direction. We're actually going to equate this to the input.getVector. And now you'll see a hint pop up, which is going to define what we need to actually input. So we need to select our keybind for our negative x. And in this case, our negative x is going to be our move left. So I'll go ahead and select move left, and then I'll hit comma. And then we need to select our positive x, which is going to be our move right. And I'll select comma, negative y, which in Godot is actually move up. And then we need to select our positive y, which is going to be move down. And the input get vector takes 4 parameters, which are going to be the negative x, negative y, and positive y, like so. And now you'll see that the error actually goes away. And this vector will tell us both the direction and if the player is pressing any movement keys. And now we're going to set velocity to be the direction times the max speed. So it'll tell us which way we're supposed to be facing and how fast we're going to be moving in that direction. And then underneath this, we're simply just going to add the move and slide function, which automatically comes with the character body 2D. And this function is based on the velocity we calculated in the line above. It automatically handles things like collision, making movement smoother, and especially for things such as running into walls. And now under our movement slide, we're going to add a conditional statement. So basically we're going to check if direction.length is greater than 0. And this line is simply saying if we're basically clicking any movement key, then we're going to set last direction is equal to direction. And we're going to store which way our character is facing. For example, when we're walking left and we stop, then we're going to turn into idle left. And then we'll do the play walk animation direction. And then we'll need to create a function that pretty much just tells us exactly which direction we're going to face and which way we're going to face. So I'll come back to this if statement in a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and create a function called play walk animation, and we're going to pass in the parameter of the direction that we assigned over here. And then don't forget your colon, and we're going to look for the if direction.x is greater than 0, then we'll do a $sign, look for the animated sprite 2D, and we're simply just going to play the animation called walk right. This will filter our animations and actually select the walk right animation that we have over here. And then I'll go ahead and click enter and backspace to get rid of that extra indent. And now I'm going to type in else if, which is elif, and then look for direction.x is less than 0. Then we're just going to we can actually copy paste this and change the walk right to simply walk left, just like that. And then I'll simply do a else if statement again, and this time we'll do a .y is greater than 0. Then we're going to simply play the animation, which is going to be walk down. And last but not least, if direction.y is less than 0, then we're going to walk up. And now back to our if statement. So if direction.length is greater than 0, then last direction is going to be equal to direction. And we're simply just going to call this function called play walk animation and also pass in that direction. And now let's go ahead and actually try this out. So I'll go ahead and hit F5 on my keyboard to play. And you'll see that depending on where I click WASD, I'm going to be walking in that direction. So when I go up, left, down, right, my character will walk accordingly. But when I stop, you're going to see that my character doesn't actually go into the idle state, and it's going to keep walking no matter what. And that's just because we haven't actually assigned the idle animations into our code the way we did for our walk animations. So for example, we have this function called play walk animation, which takes in the input of our direction. And depending on what we click on from our input get vector, we're simply just going to play the animation as long as our direction.length is greater than 0. So now let's actually create a function for our idle animations. So I'm going to hit enter a few times and click backspace, and I'm going to type in func play idle animation and pass in direction again. Don't forget your colon at the end. And now pretty much we can actually copy this entire thing and change everything from walk to idle. So I'll do idle right. And for the x less than 0, we're going to do idle left. And for the y greater than 0, we're going to do idle down. And for the y less than 0, we're going to do idle up. And pretty easy, right? And now last but not least, back in our if statement, we're going to do an else if. So now I'm going to add another else. And this time, if we're not clicking an input, then we're simply just going to play that idle animation. So I'll call play idle animation like so, and also pass in direction. And what this if statement is doing is if basically we have an input key pressed, then it's going to set our direction.length to greater than 0. So if we have an input key pressed, then it's going to set last direction is going to be the direction that we're facing. And then we're going to play the animation accordingly to whichever direction we click on. Else, we're going to play the idle animation of that direction. So let's go ahead and click F5 and actually play this. And now when I go ahead and hit F5 to play, you're going to see something a little weird. So when I hit W to move up and let go, my character doesn't actually stop. Same with the A, S, and D. No matter which direction I face, my character is not stopping even though it's set up correctly. And we should actually test to debug this. And in order to debug, one way that I like to use is actually using the print key. And print will simply just print out your message, whichever you want to put, over to your console, which is at the bottom over here. So let's go ahead and try this out. Under my play walk animation, I'm simply just going to type in print, and then in parentheses, I'm actually going to print out the direction that we're moving. And also under my else, under the play idle animation, I can just copy paste that print direction as well. And now when I hit F5, you're going to notice that at the bottom, it says 0, 0, and that's totally fine. But when I go ahead and hit W, it's going to say O -1, which is working properly. But when I let go, it's going to go back to 0, 0, but my character's still moving. And same thing with the right key, left and down, and so on. It's 0, 0, but we're still moving. And why? Because in our else statement, we simply just added the play idle animation of the direction. And we don't want to pass the direction because that length is going to be greater than 0. We actually simply just want to add the last direction like so. And as we specified, the last direction is equal to this vector, which will change as soon as we click an input because our direction.length will be greater than 0. So I'll go ahead and control save, and I'll go to my game scene and click F5 to play. And now you'll see that my character is facing to the right, and when I hold the A key, he'll move to the right, and then stop, move to the left, stop, up, stop, and down, and now he stops. And now we have a working character. And because our camera is so still on our character, it kind of just looks like our character isn't really moving out of place. So we can't actually see the max speed being 100. I'm going to cancel this out and just unparent the camera 2D from the player. And now I'll click 2D at the top here to see where our camera is. And I'll zoom out a little bit just so we can see exactly where our player is going. So now I'll go ahead and click F5 and our camera is no longer attached to our player. And now you can see that my character can actually walk around like so. So what happens if we change our max speed to something greater or less? So let's go ahead and try that out. So now I'm going to go back to the script, select player.gd. I'll change max speed to something like 500 and hit Ctrl S to save. And now when I click F5, you're going to see that our character is a lot faster. And yeah, pretty simple to set up, and hopefully the explanations helped you guys a lot. And that pretty much covers how to create movement in Godot using a 2D character. Thanks for watching Code Throw. Like, subscribe, comment below what you want to see next, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.